Good afternoon. Today is the last day of January, January 31st. Welcome to the Ways and Means bill hearings, and I would like to give a warm welcome to our new Vice Chair, Vice Chair Wilkins. Welcome. Congratulations, and we will begin with our first bill hearing. Delegate Rosenberg, please come forward. And there are three witnesses, one of which will be virtual folks, so that witness will go after everyone who is in person. And folks who are testifying, you will have 2 minutes, and then you will see the timer go off, or I will politely interrupt you and ask you to wrap up. So with that, whenever you're ready, welcome.
You once, where you are now sitting, a few vice chairs ago. And it's a pleasure to be back here with this legislation, which speaks to a simple but very important aspect of our election process. That is foreign manufacturers or foreign involvement in the election equipment that is essential to our conducting a fair election process here in Maryland. This is legislation that has passed the House, I believe it's 3 times. This House, as well as it's passed the House of Representatives in Washington as H.R. 1. That's where this is derived from the H.R. 1, the For the People Act, that, and I've worked with Congressman Sarbanes, who was the lead sponsor of that bill, and felt that we should be setting the same example that they hope to set at the federal level. That is that if a manufacturer is involved in creating the equipment or in some modification, that information must be made known to our State Board of Elections. And the State Board of Elections is the administrator is then responsible for forwarding that forwarding that information to the presiding officers, to the governor, to the appropriate people, so that we are aware of the potential problem, and then the administrator has the authority to nullify the contract if, in the administrator's judgment, that is what should happen. So that is what this bill does. It is preventive in nature, but addressing a problem that is real with regard to the integrity of our election process. That is the tampering that can be done. Whether or not it has been done, is this bill says if we have reason to believe that it's happening here, the contract is nullified. So I would appreciate, yet again, from this committee and the full House, then, a favorable report. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Questions? Delegate Buckle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to confirm this bill passed the House unanimously last year. Is that correct? I think it was 136 to nothing, at least what the thing. Same bill, same posture.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. You were well taught.
Any further questions for the bill sponsor? Okay, seeing none, thank you. Dana Schultz, please, for 2 minutes. Is there a Dana Schultz here? Oh, yeah. Hello, whenever you're ready, you can begin.
Good afternoon. My name is Dana Schultz. I live in Millersville. I'm a United States Air Force combat veteran. I have a bachelor's degree in public affairs. I have a master's in counseling. Due to the growing nonpartisan distrust in our election system, the identification of numerous apparent voting anomalies in the state of Maryland, and the documented issues pertaining to voting nationwide, as a minimum, machines used in our elections must be made in the United States as a matter of national security. Election systems should be part of our critical infrastructure. The recent arrest on October 4th, 2022 of Eugene Yu, the CEO of a Michigan election software firm, provides open source data and groundbreaking research available for all states to investigate the election integrity of electronic voting machine software and personnel. The storing of poll worker data is documented as existing on Chinese Communist Party servers. Knowing the history of the CCP to harvest data is probable cause to expect that harvesting of personal data extends beyond the poll workers and into other areas of election integrity, such as asset management systems, ballot tracking systems, poll books, and potentially all areas of electronic use of machines. Much of this information has been available for a long time. Software developers are central to the development of the source code. According to Anthony Marks in his 2018 article in the Courier Mail, Anthony's technology source, this is a huge vulnerability for hackers to interfere in our election process. By this breach of security, it's time for local and state boards of election, representatives, attorneys, the Secretary of State, the governor to take action now and protect our vote. Suspension of the use of electronic machines and implementation of hand counting of paper ballots is strongly encouraged. Do you believe it's wise for us to use voting machines that were created to overthrow governments around the world?
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Schultz? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. We have a virtual witness, Cyril Draffin. And while we are waiting.
Hello.
Oh,
Honorable Chair and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak before you in support of House Bill 130 pertaining to foreign manufacture of election systems. My name is Cyril Draffin. I'm an MIT project advisor in cybersecurity and serve as a member of the Maryland Cybersecurity Council. The state needs its elections to be recognized as fair, with accurate and valid results. We do not want uncertainty because of possible foreign influence on our election software and hardware. In the past, Maryland Board of Elections have apparently purchased equipment from companies with Russian affiliations. That's a cause for concern because foreign governments such as Russia and China would like to disrupt U.S. elections process for their own benefit. And we want results of the Maryland elections to be publicly recognized as valid. HB 130 is a straightforward way to address this issue of foreign ownership that could have influence over Maryland election systems. In addressing supply chains, there may be some complexity in determining the original manufacturer of semiconductor components used in election equipment. But there should be no ambiguity on the ownership of the hardware systems integrator and the software developers for election systems used in Maryland. Because of the need for election security, I encourage a favorable report on House Bill 130 and the committee's continued attention to election cybersecurity. Thank you once again for the opportunity to testify today.
thank you very much. Are there any questions for Mr. Draffin? Yes, Delegate Miller?
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. So question, you mentioned supply chain, and so with the voting, and I apologize, obviously, I wasn't here, I didn't hear any of this last year at all. With supply chain issues, is that going to be a problem? I mean, we all understand the chip manufacturing with cars and that a lot of times vehicles are made here, but that doesn't mean all the components are made here. Does that apply that you guys know as far as the same with voting machines? Like, is
Yes.
there a machine that would fit this piece of legislation?
Yes, there is. There are a number of components that are manufactured overseas. It's very expensive to make sure that each of those parts are manufactured in the United States. That would drive the cost way up. I was director of strategy of Northrop Grumman Corporation, so we did this for military equipment. But for state election items, you don't need it. For individual electronic components, you can verify where it's coming from. What you need is the systems integration and also the cybersecurity to watch to make sure there's no unexpected communications out of your devices that would suggest there was a flaw in the hardware or the chips themselves. So the answer is you will be buying some international equipment. You just make sure that it's tested and that you have ongoing cyber testing for the equipment as it's being used. So it's doable.
Okay. Does that testing already exist? Aren't they already certified?
They're certified, yes, but you also want to make sure that you don't have, for any equipment, you want to make sure if there's an open communications link. It's going directly to the Maryland Board of Elections, and it's not going
Right.
out to some other
course.
operation. And more importantly, you want to make sure there's not incoming directions.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 130. Thank you, Delegate Rosenberg. Delegate Williams, House Bill 41. And Delegate Williams, there are two folks signed up favorable. Would you like them to come up with you?
I think one of my witnesses, I had received a message that she is having some mobility issues in terms
Okay.
of getting into the building. I don't see her here.
Monica Wiley.
Monica Wiley is the individual that is running behind because
Okay.
of her
Okay.
limitations.
We'll just continue to call her in case she shows up. But whenever you're ready, Delegate Williams. And committee, I should also note that Mr. Demarinis is here from the State Board, should you have any questions directly for the State Board. Go ahead, Delegate Williams.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Wilkins, and members of the House Ways and Means Committee. I'm Delegate Nicole Williams of District 22, testifying in favor of House Bill 41. This legislation would make curbside voting an option for people with physical disabilities and expecting mothers by requiring local election boards to establish at least one accessible voting location in each county and in Baltimore City. Here in Maryland, we have various ways for people to vote, such as mail-in voting, ballot boxes, as well as in-person voting. However, this bill will allow those who prefer to vote in person but are unable to stand for extended periods of time or simply walk to the front door or walk to a ballot box to be able to vote at their local polling place or early voting center. This legislation comes at a time when voting rights are increasingly under attack across our country, and there are a number of states across the country that have curbside voting, such as Virginia, North Carolina, Missouri, and Wisconsin. This is my fourth year introducing this bill, and my office has worked diligently in trying to address the concerns of the Maryland Association of Election Officials, as well as the Board of Elections regarding their concerns that they have had in the past regarding this bill. One of the concerns raised has been about making this a pilot program. Well, this bill is the pilot program. We have narrowed this bill down so that it only authorizes one location per county, as opposed to having it at every polling establishment, such as in previous iterations of this bill. And additionally, this bill gives the state government a half a year to design curbside voting at that one location, which will hopefully allow for additional time for the State Board of Elections to have the personnel needed to effectuate this bill, and as well as the necessary training to implement this bill. Another issue that has come up in the past has been, do we have to regulate who is requesting this? No. It is up to the individual to say, I am in need of curbside voting, and there will be no requirement for the State Board of Elections or our local election officials to have to determine whether or not a person is eligible or not. As always, I am happy to continue to work with the advocates in hopes that we can find a resolution that will benefit all Marylanders and address the concerns that are raised. By establishing curbside voting here in Maryland, we can ensure that all Marylanders, regardless of their ability, can practice their right to vote in any way that works best for them. And for those reasons, I urge this committee to give a favorable report to House Bill 41, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Ma'am, go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Chair Atterbury and Ways and Means Committee members. My name is Samuela Ansa, and I'm the Voting Rights Advocate at Disability Rights Maryland. We are committed to protecting and advancing the civil rights of all Marylanders with disabilities. Our voting work seeks to increase opportunities for Marylanders with disabilities to be part of their communities through voting by advocating for equal and equitable access to the ballot. As such, we support the establishment of curbside voting here in Maryland, as it has been implemented in 27 other states across the country. Curbside voting will allow another accessible means for voters with disabilities, those who cannot enter a polling place, those who are immunocompromised, to cast a ballot from the safety of their cars. Certainly, expanding methods of voting is beneficial for greater access to our democracy, a fundamental right of all citizens, and in the best interest of our society. For those reasons, we urge a favorable report on HB 41. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Delegate Griffith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Deli, for bringing the bill forward. Good to see you again. A couple quick questions. So first, with this version of the bill, the need is completely self-verified.
Correct.
And the other 26 states have passed this. Is it the same way, complete self-verification, or is there any method of verification? Because obviously we want folks with disabilities or those who can't vote in person. Originally, that was what the absentee ballot system was in place for, was to support those folks. So in the other 26 states, do any of them have any methods of verification beyond self-verification that you need to vote curbside?
Not that I'm aware of.
Right. Is there a way you can find out for me and get back to me?
Sure.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Delegate Miller.
I also thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for bringing this bill forward. I did have a couple questions just to clarify. One is, what method would they use to announce? So you said not to use a telephone system or a call-ahead system. Do you have any examples that other states have used for when the voter is there at the?
Yeah, so some other states, they would have some type of mechanism like a bell or something that they could access that would be right outside when they would pull up in order to notify the election officials who are inside that there is someone outside who is requesting curbside voting.
Okay, is that going to be, are you talking about accessible from the vehicle or something that they walk up to?
Something that would be accessible from the vehicle, or even currently, I think folks have the option to call ahead as well under the current system, but something that they would be able to access from the vehicle.
Okay, do we know if that's possible at some of the voting? Because I know you didn't want it everywhere. Obviously, not every poll, I understand, that you were
Yeah, and
targeting.
the reason we limited down to one location was because there are some polling places where that would not be feasible.
Right.
From the conversations that we had with the Board of Elections and the local election officials. And so we recognize that. We know that some of our polling places are not necessarily always as accessible as we would like. And so that was one of the main reasons for limiting it to one location per county in Baltimore City.
Okay, and then the other one is just a clarifying question on D2. It said that an election judge shall give an eligible voter using curbside voting the choice to vote by marking a paper ballot at the curbside voting location or by using a ballot marking device inside the polling place.
That was a typo.
Okay, I'm just curious because then it wouldn't be curbside. But,
Correct.
Okay,
We had submitted an amendment to the committee. I'm not certain if the committee had received
maybe I got it, but
the
that
amendment,
might
and
be
if
on
not,
me.
I apologize.
Yeah,
We will definitely get that to council to get to the members of the committee. But that was a typo.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I honestly, if you gave it to us, I did not see it, and I apologize.
No worries.
I was just very confused as I was reading everything. But
Okay.
I think it's, as obviously we spend a lot of time at polls around here, and there were some situations where we've had to help people go in to vote where it was not accessible. So I think it's a great idea that you're putting through and helping work through this progress. So thank you.
Thank you.
Delegate Barnes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And maybe this is a question for John Willem, if he's there, if he can come up, please. I mean, Jerry, I'm sorry. As we look at this, and Delegate Williams has already indicated that she has brought this bill up 4 times already, do we have a good understanding of how many people here in the state of Maryland are handicapped or would take advantage of such a initiative like this?
We don't have that information. We don't have that. We don't ask if the person is disabled on the voter registration. So no, that's why it would be self-verification, because we do not have any of that information. And it's not just disabled people as well. It's also pregnant individuals as well, which is another piece of data which we would not have.
Okay. Do we have any idea what the cost would be?
I think the fiscal note has the cost on it.
Yeah, I didn't see it. So
Okay, I
what
think it
is
was
the
like
fiscal?
$250,000. I was like, but the fiscal note has the costs.
Delegate Williams, do you know what the fiscal note is?
I'd have to pull it up. Give me 1 second here. 125,000.
Is that per location or the totality?
So it says general fund expenditures would increase by 200,000 in fiscal year 2024, and then 125,000 annually thereafter, and that's statewide.
And it also imposes a mandate on local government as well.
Right, and my understanding is that's because of the cost split with
Right,
the polling
exactly.
books. So before, the state would absorb the cost 100% of the polling books, but I think recently there's been an agreement to split that cost 50/50 with the local boards.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Are there any other further questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. And it has been brought to our attention that Ms. Wiley is in the building. I don't know if she's in the committee.
Yeah, I think she's making her way
Okay.
here. She does have a physical disability, Madam Chair, so that.
Okay, so we'll circle back to her.
Okay, thank
So,
you.
Thank you. We have 2 individuals signed up to testify in person unfavorable, David Morrisberger and Dana Schultz, please. And whoever wants to go first.
I can go first. Dave Morrisberger, Anne Arundel County, lifelong resident of Maryland, went to Maryland Public Schools and Public University. I've been involved in elections for many years, been a candidate, helped candidates, done the fundraising. I'm also an engineer and a cybersecurity engineer. And I oppose this because anytime you open up an access point, it increases the vulnerabilities of the system. We live in a world where not everybody can be trusted, whether it's a foreign adversary or even local adversaries, and this just opens it up. And you heard here today that it's self-designated, kind of. Are you disabled and you want to do this? So that really opens it up to kind of a bad actor's decision to go and do this when they're not really disabled or something like that. And I don't believe in a check that says, how do you verify somebody's disabled? I don't agree with that at all. That's why I oppose the bill. I also want to talk about other states. Just because other states do something does not mean Maryland should go ahead and do it. Maryland should, it's an independent state, and it should decide on its own what is right for the citizens of Maryland and the future of Maryland. It talks in here about scanned ballots, that the judge who goes out and meets the voter, they will scan the judge. As a past election judge, chief election judge, anytime you deal with a ballot, it must be 2 judges. It must be the Democratic chief judge and the Republican chief judge. There does not say anything in here about it will be 2 judges. And then you asked a question about the expenditures in the financial one. For the local expenditure, it was $485,000 for the local expenditure. So it's not just the 200,000 they talked about here. It was also the 485 that the burden that's going to be put on the counties and local jurisdictions. Thank you, and look forward to any questions.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hello, my name's Dana Schultz. I'm a United States Air Force combat veteran. I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. Polls continue to show that low voter confidence is nonpartisan, and it's not getting any better. Even in Maryland, with all the accommodations of extended voting days and hours and a massive push for mail-in voting, turnout was 16.6% lower than in 2018 election. Clearly, these accommodations are not inspiring more Marylanders to make their voice heard via voting. In my opinion, a lack of trust in the voting system is a significant factor driving these results. 2 points. Republican turnout decreased the least statewide and countywide in Anne Arundel County. 2, even with overwhelming mail-in ballot use by Democrats, total Republican turnout exceeded Democratic turnout by several points, further demonstrating the bipartisan distrust of our electoral system. Election integrity, there hasn't been any research done for this to determine how many individuals cannot vote without this service. If it's only for convenience, it's an astronomical expense to the state and a severe detriment to voter confidence. My husband was a provisional judge during the primary and general election of '22, and eyewitness to the extreme shortage of election judges. Curbside voting will substantially increase the number needed since 2 judges from 2 separate parties will be needed to go out and help a person vote and follow the long procedure explained in HB 41, which includes going in to scan the ballot and then bring it back out with the receipt. Election judges prefer not to even touch a voter's ballot. Will chief judges be required to perform this service? They require more training. This is a major disruption of the voting locations processes. If on election day this is allowed and require it, will have election judges, 2 extra election judges per site, then we'll also have to have more ballots at the less sites. Drive up, drop in ballot drop boxes are already available. Curbside voting will increase the exorbitant amount of money and time and resources. I oppose HB 41.
Thank you. Are there any questions for either of these witnesses? Okay, seeing none, thank you both very much for testifying today. Has Ms. Wiley joined us? Monica Wiley? Oh, thank you. Okay. Thank you. She will be in soon. So we will move to our 2 virtual witnesses. First, Lou Ann Blake is testifying favorable with an amendment. Ms. Blake, whenever you're ready, you'll have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Ways and Means Committee. I am a member of the Greater Baltimore chapter of the National Federation of the Blind, and I am testifying on behalf of the NFB of Maryland. We support HB 41 with the proposed amendment that the accessible ballot marking device be made available outside of the polling place to a voter who wishes to vote curbside but cannot, for reasons of disability or because the polling site is not physically accessible, cannot actually enter the polling place to use the ballot marking device. Not making the ballot marking device available outside the polling place would actually be a violation of Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act, because voters with disabilities must be afforded an opportunity to vote privately and independently that is equivalent to the opportunity afforded to voters without disabilities. So when curbside voting is made available to voters without disabilities, voters with disabilities must also have equal access. That's required by Title II of the ADA. The ballot marking devices that we use in Maryland have a battery backup. That's in case power is lost at the polling station. So they can be brought outside to the voter on a cart or whatever other means is utilized. So that is not an issue. They are easily handled. They're not very large. They have an internal printer. So it's just the one machine that needs to be brought out to the voter. So it's not a complicated matter. Also regarding security, these machines are not connected to the internet. So there is no security concerns there. Actually gaining access inside the machine could not be accomplished by a voter without great effort and would certainly be noticed. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Blake? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Ms. Blake. Next, we have Katja Harper, who is testifying virtually unfavorably.
Yes, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to comment on this bill. So I have several concerns about the bill. I'm aware that it's done with the intent of making voting more accessible to disabled or pregnant individuals. However, I think this purpose is already served by Maryland's mail-in voting allowances. Since voters now have multiple weeks to turn in a ballot by mail, there isn't I don't think, strong need for a curbside voting setup. Furthermore, I think there's privacy concerns with a curbside voting setup. In addition to, I think, jeopardizing the secret ballot, as the individual would not, as the previous speaker pointed out, have access to a ballot marking device under the current bill. They would be potentially watched by other voters who may be behind them or standing outside in the electioneering zone. As many of you may know, current polling places have electioneering zones where campaign staff can stand and often harass voters before they go into the polls. I think it would be a mistake to have an outdoor voting setup of any kind due to the concern of them potentially being harassed by campaign staff. And in regards to potentially bringing the ballot marking device outside, this is also concerning because if the battery ran out, I think that could interrupt the voting process for everybody who might be in the line of cars. Or if there's inclement weather, I think that could also damage the integrity of the ballot marking device. So with no foreseeable way to guarantee the privacy of the secret ballot, I would oppose this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Harper? Okay, seeing none, let's just wait a moment. We know that Ms. Riley is in the building and on her way. So we're just going to wait a couple minutes here before we close out this testimony. A little elevator music. Very easy listening enjoyment. Elevator music. One moment, please. Okay, folks, we are going to just pivot and then recall this bill. So for now, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 41, and we will circle back if and when Ms. Riley is able to join us. So now, Delegate Feldmark, House Bill 176, and whoever you would like to come up with you. In favorables, Morgan Drayton is here, Emily Scarr, Kevin Canali. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, it's so nice to say that, and committee members. For the record, I'm Jessica Feldmark. I'm pleased to be here this afternoon to present House Bill 176. So I know this committee is already familiar with the benefits of public campaign financing, and for many of you who are returning members, you are already familiar with this bill. But House Bill 176, for those of you who have not heard it previously, would allow counties to build on the success of their existing public campaign financing programs. We know that small donor matching programs help limit the influence of large political donors, increase public engagement and confidence in our political process, and expand access for more of our community members to consider running for office. So 10 years ago, the General Assembly authorized local governments, the governing bodies of our counties, to establish public financing programs for county government offices, for the legislative and executive branches of county government. What this bill would do is expand that authority to include state offices elected at the county level. So these are essentially Board of Education and the courthouse offices. Over the past decade that counties have had this authority, several have already established programs. Montgomery County had its first elections with public campaign financing in 2018. Howard County just had our first elections with public campaign financing in 2022. Baltimore City's program will be available for the 2024 elections, and both Baltimore County and Prince George's County will have programs in place for the 2026 elections. Once a county has been through an election cycle with their public campaign financing program, they should have the discretion to choose to expand that program to these additional offices. So I ask for your favorable report and welcome any questions.
Hi, my name is Emily Scarr. I'm the director of Maryland PIRG, which is the state public interest group. We're a small donor-funded organization with grassroots members across the state. Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair. It's nice to see everybody after a few years. The delegate did a great job explaining this bill. We've found that small donor public financing programs are popular. That's why voters are asking for them. Many have pushed for the programs locally through ballot initiatives. And once they experience them, as they have in Montgomery County and Howard County, they want to see them for more offices. And I think it's especially impactful for these smaller offices, which are often people's first run at public office, that they aren't limited by their access to wealth and being able to run for office. So as the delegate said, one of the key benefits of these programs is we do find it expands who can even consider running for office, because they're able to run a competitive race based on support from their community, not just their access to money. So this program doesn't force anyone to do anything. All it does is enable those counties that have already established these programs to expand them through the legislative process to include more offices. Maryland PIRG Foundation did do a report on the Montgomery County 2018 election, which my testimony links to if you'd like to see some of the results of the program, at both limiting large donations, increasing the number of donors participating in our democratic process, and really re-engaging the community in our elections. So we hope you'll support this measure to expand our successful small donor program to more offices at the local level.
Hi, my name is Morgan Drayton. I'm the policy manager for Common Cause Maryland, which is a nonprofit government transparency organization Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the committee for having me today. We are in strong support of HB 176, which authorizes these local counties to establish public campaign finance programs for these additional offices, as the delegate and Emily already mentioned. The rise of corporate and large campaign contributions have sort of forced Maryland election officials and candidates to be increasingly dependent on these donors at the cost of time spent listening to their constituents and serving their constituents. These big money donations, which are those large contributions that the average voter cannot afford to make, end up drowning out the voices of smaller donors. Public campaign finance programs allow these candidates to run for office on these small donations, as we've heard, while still remaining competitive with those who do choose to still accept large donations and large corporate contributions. This will both reduce corporate and large campaign donor spending and re-engage the community with the electoral process. As we've heard, these programs are very popular, effective, and are gaining momentum across the state. There are currently programs in Montgomery County, Howard County, Prince George's County, Baltimore County, and Baltimore City. We at Common Cause Maryland support amplifying the voices of everyday Marylanders in every election for office, and for these reasons, we would request a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Oh, Delegate Hornberger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question on how this would work. For the school board races, which are nonpartisan, I believe it's top 2 vote getters proceed. Could you just tell me how that would take place for primary in general?
So I think the specifics of the example you gave in top 2 vote getters proceed, I think that's basically, you're saying per opening, correct? Per open seat, right?
So if I'm in a race and I'm in the primary, there's only 2 people that filed. Both of them qualify and then they carry the money to the general?
So typically, you're saying if only 2 people filed? Typically, programs are designed not to allow funding in what's considered an uncontested race. So I don't think that would come up, but those are the specifics of the program that the county would establish.
So you would opt in after the filing deadline?
The way it's worked for so far, so again, the local legislators work out some of the details within guardrails that are already laid out in the 2013 Campaign Finance Reform Act. Yep. But what they've all done, and we will advocate for, is they're not distributing any public funds to uncontested candidates, but that doesn't mean folks can't opt into the system. So in Montgomery County, we've had a number of candidates who are in uncontested races still opting to abide by the public financing program, which means they're only accepting small contributions, they're not taking any corporate contributions, things like that. But they never receive any matching funds, any county or state dollars, unless they are in a competitive race.
Okay, even if it's nonpartisan?
So, yeah, I would assume the same would be for nonpartisan. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
Any other questions? Okay, yep. Delegate Long, do you have a question?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Chair. Maybe, okay. Good, I got some bills I need passed this time. I have a question. I have to apologize. I had to step out for a minute. What about people that want to run for office and they can self-finance? How would that work with this?
So this would not preclude that. They would not be, this is another option for financing. If someone's planning to self-finance, they wouldn't probably choose to participate in a public financing program. It would be one or the other. But having this option does not mean someone cannot self-finance.
All right, thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. Next, Kevin Canali. And Dana Schultz is signed up for information, but you can come up as well. No? Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Kevin Canali here in support of House Bill 176. You have my written testimony. I think the bill sponsor and the previous witnesses did a great job of explaining the bill. I'll just say that, yes, we have several counties who have adopted local campaign financing at the local level. They've done that with appropriate local input, and we appreciate this bill's flexibility to allow those counties who choose to do this to expand local public campaign financing to additional offices. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but MACO is in strong support of House Bill 176, and we urge a favorable report.
Any questions for Mr. Canali? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Mr. Canali. We do have someone signed up to testify virtually. Greg Smith, in favor.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and committee members. My name is Greg Smith. I serve on the board of Sustainable Hyattsville. We're an all-volunteer grassroots org. Oops, you want me to start my video? See ya.
Go ahead, sir.
Is it on? Okay.
Yeah.
We're an all-volunteer grassroots organization, and in addition to working to protect communities and public health and the environment and to promote sustainability, we work to promote good government and to enhance people's participation in the civic and democratic processes. I want to thank Delegate Feldmark for introducing this common sense pro-democracy legislation, and to thank all the other delegates who have signed on as co-sponsors. I urge all committee members not only to support this legislation, but to champion it and work for its passage. This is simply enabling legislation. It allows the counties, doesn't compel the counties to implement small donation or small donor campaign financing for a broader range of offices. I suggested that, and I'm glad to see MACO's support. I would suggest it makes sense to leave it to the counties to decide what kind of programs they would like to have. They can decide on their own, based on their resources and the politics in their county, whether or not they'd like to implement these programs. I also participated in seeing the passage of small donation campaign financing legislation in Prince George's County, when Delegate Lehman served on the county council. And one of the points that I made to my council member and others was, this can be an excellent way to enhance citizen participation in elections. If I'll just wrap up in just a sec. If a citizen believes that by making a small donation, they could have a more meaningful impact on the election, they're more likely to vote, aren't they? And answering one point on the fiscal note says that it could significantly increase local expenditures. Well, let's look at what's significant. Montgomery County's FY 2023 approved operating budget was $6.3 billion. The $3.7 billion that the fiscal note reports Montgomery County spending on the 2022 election cycle, a four-year cycle, translates to less than 0.06%, 1/16 of 1% of the county's operating budget for 4 years. It's an even smaller fraction if you look at the four-year cycle and 4 years worth of budgets. This seems like a reasonable investment in democracy, and I encourage the committee to enable counties to make their own best decisions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Any questions for Mr. Smith? Okay, seeing none, thank you. And that concludes the testimony on House Bill 176. Calling Delegate Feldmark, House Bill 177. You must have filed them at the same time. Morgan Drayton is here, favorable with amendment. She can come up as well if she's here. No? I couldn't hear you, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and committee members. For the record, I am still Delegate Jessica Feldmark, presenting now House Bill 177. So ballot questions are a critical and fundamental piece of our democracy. When policy questions are so important, we put them directly to the people. As you know, despite their importance, ballot questions are often among the votes around which voters have the most confusion and uncertainty. This bill before you would help provide better access to information on ballot questions. So, as you know, ballot questions are drafted to describe another item, right? Something such as a proposed constitutional amendment, charter amendment, or an enactment. So this bill would require that voters have access for at least 65 days before the election, not only to the ballot question, but also to the full text of the enactment or proposed language that that ballot question describes. This will allow voters to be better informed by providing the full detail of the actual item that voters are being asked to support or oppose by ballot question. You will hear some testimony requesting an amendment to ensure that the ballot questions themselves are drafted in plain language. I do just want to be clear that I do consider this a friendly amendment and, in fact, have already started conversation with our committee counsel on how best to approach that. So with that, I will ask for your favorable report and happy to answer any questions.
Hello again. For the record, Morgan Drayton, Policy Manager for Common Cause Maryland. As an organization that works to bring the inner workings of government into focus, we definitely believe that more transparency for the public can only be a good thing. As the delegate mentioned, ballot measures are questions that we see voters confused on more often than not. And we believe that the publishing of the complete text of the question in this widely accessible area for the 65 days would give voters more time to familiarize themselves with ballot questions before they step into that polling booth. And as we heard, we do have one friendly amendment, which is that plain language requirement, just to ensure that the information being shared with the public is understandable to all voters. Otherwise, we are very supportive of this bill, and we would request a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much, Delegate, for bringing this bill. I think it's an important issue for us to unpack. I just wanted to get a sense, kind of a real-world example of how this would work, and what comes to mind is our recent ballot question, I guess, related to cannabis legalization, for example, or just anything that you could provide as an example. What would have changed, or how would it have appeared differently if under this bill, if you can just kind of outline how that would have worked?
So, currently, right, the ballot question itself was available, and that was on sample ballots, available through Board of Elections. This would require that the Board of Elections also have clearly available the actual legislation that the General Assembly passed. Right, so it's a connection to not just the text of the ballot question itself, but the enactment or amendment language that the General Assembly, acted on, or the corollary, at the local level, if there's, local county legislation that a council enacts or passes and then is enacted with the county executive, right? And that might be petitioned to referendum, then not only would the description of that enactment be available, but also a connection to the bill itself that was passed.
Delegate Griffith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A quick question. So I appreciate transparency in all its forms, so I appreciate the bill. I appreciate Common Cause's efforts to expand that transparency to plain language. I agree with that. Would you be interested in also expand that transparency to including wherever this is housed, the net effect or physical note? Because even in plain language text, sometimes with the legislation we all deal with, we still don't know the ripple effect of some of the legislation we do, right? Until we really dig into the physical note and we peel back what the plain language says and really unpack the bill. And I think that would include voters as well. Would you also be agreeable to expanding that same transparency of plain language to including that physical note or net effects statement or something along those lines along with that?
I think that's an interesting idea, so thank you for raising it. I'm certainly open to figuring out how we would do that. I don't know that it makes sense for essentially the entire bill file to be, posted by the Board of Elections, but simply sort of access to it or where to find it might be.
I'm thinking just, and I agree, not the whole thing, but something where it's the bill, it's not just the language presented, but where it's kind of explained to the average voter, this is what this means. Because there's language, even plain language in the bill that, before I was elected official, I wouldn't know what that particular language, that particular statement, that particular word of art would mean, so.
I'd be willing to continue the conversation.
Thank you very much.
I think it's an interesting idea.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Delegate Ebersol?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think this is what this bill does, but if it does, I want to know how it would be managed. There was a county somewhere in the last election that had a referendum to lower the age, the minimum age for someone to serve on the county council. But if you read the question, it wasn't all clear it was being lowered or raised. It just said the age would be 21. Now, I supported that, and that's irrelevant, but I talked to some people, and people had no idea that it was lowering the age. Some thought that it was establishing an age or raising an age. And so would they just, first of all, that would be something that would be dealt with in this legislation, am I right?
Right, well, you would have access to the actual, act. So you would see if the age was being changed from 25 to 21. You would see the language changing it from 25 to 21.
Right, and probably not the whole Baltimore County charter, which it was, but that part of the charter so people could have it available.
Right.
And I might have missed it. Where would people access that?
So it would be posted in a manner widely accessible to the public. I would hope that one of the most widely accessible to the public manners to post something would be posting it online.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you.
Sure.
Are there any further questions? Okay, we have two individuals signed up to testify virtually. The first one, Councilman Ryan Dorsey.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and congratulations on your appointment. Thank you, Delegate Feldmark, for working with me on bringing this bill and to the committee for hearing it. I'm Ryan Dorsey. I am a city council member in Baltimore, and I'm testifying from my office at City Hall. I really appreciate you hearing me virtually, as I am myself in committee hearings today. This bill is really simple. Voters should have easy free access to every word of what they are being asked to vote on. And as Delegate Feldmark just said, it would be reasonable just for the Board of Elections, who is already required to be given the change language, particularly in cases where there is a petitioner asking for a question to be voted on. That language is already required to be submitted to the Board of Elections along with petition signatures. But the Board of Elections, neither the Board of Elections nor the petitioner themselves is ever required to make the underlying change language readily available. What does that mean? In Baltimore City, we just had question K in this last election, a question on term limits that was summarized in one paragraph on the ballot, but represented a page and a half of text that was actually being altered in the city charter. And it was the disconnect between the ballot language and the actual petitioned change language was so great that even former mayor, former dean of the Howard Law School, president of the University of Baltimore, Kurt Schmoke, went on to WYPR and made erroneous conclusions about what the effect of this charter amendment would be, because he didn't have the full text to understand what the actual question was that was being petitioned. And you can see that covered by Tom Hall on Midday WYPR in 3 separate installments from September. So I urge a favorable report on House Bill 177 and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Councilman. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Next, Janet Milson.
Good afternoon, Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Wilkins, and members of the committee. It's good to see you all again. For the record, my name is Janet Millinson, and I represent the League of Women Voters of Maryland a nonpartisan organization with 1,500 members statewide. One of the League's key principles is that election systems should increase voter participation. So we work to educate Marylanders on public policy issues, as well as the nuts and bolts of when and how to cast a ballot. You may be among the many people who rely on our printed voters guide or our online Vote 411 site for this detailed information. The State Board of Elections website is also a good resource for people who know where to look. However, all too often voters see ballot questions for the first time when they're faced with those little ovals reading for and against. At that point, they may not feel informed enough to choose. For example, in the recent general election, several of the statewide ballot questions got about 200,000 fewer total votes than were cast for candidates for governor or senator. So we support House Bill 177 because it requires that the text of ballot questions be posted ahead of a general election, quote, in a manner widely accessible to the public. However, we'd like to propose this friendly amendment to the bill to also require including a plain language explanation when a question's wording is necessarily complex. In summary, the League of Women Voters recommends adding such an amendment and urges a favorable report from the committee on House Bill 177. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Millenton? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 177. House Bill 192, Delegate Plakovich Carr, and your panel, Jacqueline Coolidge and Morgan Drayton. I feel like I should say, isn't that the price of right? Come on down.
Thank you, Madam Chair, colleagues. Good afternoon. For the record, I'm Delegate Julie Plakovich Carr, here to present House Bill 192. This bill would ban untraceable cryptocurrency campaign contributions and expenditures in our political campaigns in Maryland, and would also allow our comptroller's office to go after crypto assets for the payment of back taxes. I think we're all aware that cryptocurrency really has been growing rapidly in its use in Maryland and nationally, yet our state laws just aren't keeping up. As of 2021, 16% of Americans have invested in, traded, or used a cryptocurrency. I think many of us are familiar with things like Bitcoin, but for those who aren't familiar, cryptocurrency basically is a decentralized digital money. And although it can be used to buy goods and services, at this point, many people treat it as an investment, just like they would a stock. So first of all, the bill would update our state's campaign finance laws to prohibit political campaigns and entities from accepting or making expenditures using cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency is virtually untraceable, so its use by political entities is especially troubling. For similar reasons, we already banned cash contributions of more than $100, and I think we should be treating cryptocurrency the same. The other big concern is that cryptocurrencies can be very volatile in their nature. Just yesterday, I was looking at an exchange that was tracking more than 900 cryptocurrencies. And although many of those cryptocurrencies were stable or down, some of them were up by 5, 10, 25, 75%, even in a single day. So what that means is someone who makes a $6,000 campaign contribution, which is our legal limit, that could be worth more than $6,000 by the time the campaign dispenses of that asset. And in the most extreme example, there was a couple of cryptocurrencies that were up by 14,000% in a single day. So even a very small contribution of $50 made in the morning would be worth more than $7,000 by the afternoon. Just like we say that people cannot receive stocks to their campaigns, they can't contribute stocks because of the volatility, we shouldn't be allowing cryptocurrency. Overall, the use of cryptocurrency in campaigns is growing. There hasn't been good tracking at the state level, but in terms of federal offices, there are a number of congressional campaigns that have accepted or solicited cryptocurrency contributions, including at least one here in Maryland. And to date, other states are taking action. 3 states currently prohibit cryptocurrency contributions to political campaigns, and several others set very low contribution limits. So I hope we can do the same here in Maryland. The second part of the bill has to do with the comptroller's office. Basically, as a state, we have a number of ways that we have allowed the comptroller's office to seek information about and to seize assets. When a taxpayer or entity owes back taxes to the state, we allow the comptroller's office to go after wages, cash, bank accounts, mutual funds, safe deposit boxes, real property, equipment, vehicles, and business inventory. This would just treat cryptocurrency similar as these other assets. Otherwise, we're basically creating a loophole and allowing people who are engaged in tax evasion to hide their assets in cryptocurrency where we can't get it as a state. And I will note that the comptroller's office has informed me that they are supportive of this provision of the bill. So given the growth in cryptocurrency markets, I hope that we'll be able to act this session to update our state's laws. Thank you.
Hello again, Morgan Drayton for the record, Policy Manager for Common Cause Maryland, and we are in support of HB 192. I will keep my testimony short. We are not tech experts, but there is ample evidence in recent news showcasing the risks of cryptocurrency when it comes to money laundering and fraud. Even established crypto wallets like BitPay and Coinbase Wallet are known to create new addresses for each transaction. This can mask the origins of these donations, which raises strong questions for us about transparency and FEC compliance. Cryptocurrency can easily be used to hide illegal campaign contributions from unknown sources in this way. For these reasons, we agree that Common Cause Maryland agrees that cryptocurrency should be excluded from campaign donations, and we request a favorable report on HB 192.
Hello. Thank you, Madam Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Jackie Coolidge with the League of Women Voters of Maryland, a nonpartisan nonprofit organization. We have a long-standing position in support of improved methods of financing political campaigns in order to ensure the public's right to know and to combat corruption and undue influence, among other things. We are interested in this bill and supporting it. We think back to the Supreme Court's 2010 Citizens United decision. Not that the League was a big fan of every part of that decision, but we do take note that the majority opinion in that case did support the need for disclosure. They said, quote, "Identification of the source of advertising may be required as a means of disclosure so that the people will be able to evaluate the arguments to which they are being subjected." And further, the First Amendment protects political speech, and disclosure permits citizens and shareholders to react to the speech of corporate entities in a proper way. This transparency enables the electorate to make informed decisions and give proper weight to different speakers and messages. We've seen plenty of news recently about the risks of cryptocurrency for money laundering and fraud. So we therefore support very much the bill, and we urge a favorable report on HB 192. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions for this panel? Delegate Hornberger, and then Delegate Buckle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's a lot going on with this bill, so I'm going to try to apply it to both of these pathways that you have, one for the comptroller's office, one for campaign donations. So my understanding with the Fed, if let's say you were doing something nefarious using cryptocurrency, they would come in and seize that cryptocurrency, and then they would sell it at face value. In other words, it would be translated to what's normally used in our monetary system, which is cash. So I'm trying to understand, with the wild fluctuations, wouldn't the comptroller's office or the Board of Elections treat it the same way? Because once you're accepting this cryptocurrency, you're immediately having to go buy something, and I know my vendors don't accept cryptocurrency. So I'm just trying to understand, it's no different than I bought a yacht with my cryptocurrency or what have you. It is an asset, and it gets converted into dollars once the person that's doing the nefarious act is caught and prosecuted. So if you could just kind of cover what that would look like if I was doing something in either one of those realms, be it taxes, be it campaign contributions.
Yeah, and I guess I'll speak specifically to the tax side, and I'll defer. Jared Demarinis and Justin Hayes are both here and can answer questions respectively from the State Board or from the Comptroller's Office, maybe on more specifics. But if we adopted this bill, there would need to be some either regulations or internal guidance set by both those agencies in terms of what is their time frame or procedure for actually converting that crypto to some other kind of asset that the state actually deals in. I believe some of that would have to involve the state treasurer. So there would be some work that would need to be figured out internally of how we handle that. Some other states have already started tackling this. It largely would come up with, I think, what's the time frame of how we do this? How do we decide who the vendor is, et cetera?
Again, and the follow-up question, if I may, Madam Chair, is if I in good faith accept a $500 donation via cryptocurrency, and then a week later it skyrockets in value, I as the acceptor nor the donator have done anything nefarious, but somehow now we're both implicating ourselves. A donor, sorry. Yeah. A donor both implicated ourselves. So is it your intent to allow us to accept cryptocurrency as donations, or to strictly forbid it?
Yeah, that's why this bill proposes a straight ban. There are a few states that are proactively saying they allow it. They have set guidelines for you have to dispose of the asset within a certain number of days, say 5 days or something like that. But I think it does get tricky because of what you just pointed out. Someone could make what is a legal contribution, and because of no one's fault, just the ways of the market, it's worth suddenly more than is allowed. So I think the straight ban is just much cleaner. But I'd defer to Mr. Demarinis if he wants to address any other part of that.
All right, thank you.
You're good. Okay.
Delegate Buckle?
There we go. And, based on what Delegate Hornberger said, I support the concept more of just a complete ban on cryptocurrency donations, because I think you hit the nail on the head. They're like stocks. They're not money that has a constant pegged rate, and we can say your campaign contribution limit is X. It's an asset that wildly fluctuates, so you can't really make an honest transaction under our regulated theory of cryptocurrency, and I think that would cause a tremendous amount of problems. So the second part of it, you're kind of blending two things together. Do they have to go together in the bill? Could they be separated out? Because they're both related by cryptocurrency, but they're two different ideas of, the comptroller can track down your cryptocurrency accounts to satisfy tax liens, as opposed to you can't make campaign contributions. How do we deal with the fact that cryptocurrency seems to be, and as you well know, Delegate Polakovich-Carr, I am not a technological marvel, so I don't really understand cryptocurrency all that well. It seems crazy to me, but my limited understanding is it's not maintained in any physical facility likely here in Maryland. How do we, and obviously you can, comptroller can go other places when it's a bank account in New York or whatever it may be. Have you dealt with them about what they think the efficacy or the mechanism of this would be to actually go out and identify a Bitcoin and be able to get to the crypto, so to speak? Or can't people just say, oh, I have a tax thing against me, I can press a button on my phone and now it's in the Bahamas, for example, and you can't reach it. So
Right. No, you raise a good point. Really, the second part of the bill dealing with the back taxes is really only feasible because of legislation that we passed as a body, I think, last session. It was not a bill heard by our committee. I think it went through Economic Matters, but it requires these different cryptocurrencies to actually register with the state with the Commissioner of Financial Regulation, who's part of the Department of Labor, as a money transmitter. So it's basically including them in the list like banks and other financial entities that are considered money transmitters. So already a few cryptocurrencies have registered. It is not the full universe, so we do have some problems there, but we're working towards that basically at this point. So.
All right, thank you.
Are there any other questions? I should also note that Mr. Hayes is here along with Mr. Demarinis, in case anybody has any other technical questions that only they can answer. But seeing none, thank you. Ms. Schultz, did you want to testify? Come on up.
Hello, I'm Dana Schultz from Millersville, Maryland, United States Air Force veteran with a bachelor's and a master's degree. I just have a few thoughts from an everyday Marylander. I don't know a lot about cryptocurrency. I don't own any. And I know that it is considered legal tender, so it's used in forms of commerce, and I was wondering why not accept it in campaign finance, and I think you heard some reasons why not. So my questions are, can Maryland increase the tracking for accountability, or maybe require that it's turned into cash at the time of donation so that Marylanders have this as an option? And I know that some people do want to use cryptocurrency because it decentralizes our finances, allowing for free-flowing legal tender without any government interference or repercussions for any of your views. For example, when the Canadian truckers had their bank accounts locked down, then that was government interference. And so people might be using cryptocurrency to increase their freedom of legal tender. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Schultz? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 192. Delegate Long, calling House Bill 73.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Vice Chair. That was a fraudulent slip when I called you. I won't say it again. I think we've heard this bill a couple of times. It's about the homestead. It's for first-time home buyers. It has to do with the homestead property tax credit calculations for dwellings purchased by the first-time home buyers. What happens is if you purchase a property and let's say you pay $200,000 for it, and it's assessed for $100,000, your property taxes automatically go up because it's even during a mid-cycle evaluation. What this bill is trying to do is to help people obtain real estate and keep their property taxes down for a period of 5 years. Would actually gradually go in, be applied over a 5-year period. Homeownership is one of the biggest assets that people can own. It not only helps people gain wealth, it also stabilizes neighborhoods. It puts people, when you own a home, you have skin in the game. I think it would help with crime. I believe there's a lot of things that, having a lot of home ownership in a neighborhood would help. And that's why I actually put this piece of legislation together. And especially now, today, it's so hard to come up with a down payment and to be able to pay the property taxes. And, again, I really do believe that this would help in a multitude of ways. I understand there's a couple of people that are against, well, they're not really against it. Talked to SDAT just before the hearing. They don't have the equipment to actually implement this. That's sad. We need to get them some money, get this equipment updated. Because we've heard time and time again, their equipment is, is outdated. They use green screens. I kind of remember green screens, but not a whole lot. But anyway, that's why I'm presenting this bill. And, we want to just make sure that people can afford to buy a home, stay in a home. And, I think it's a great way to continue legacies for people. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Delegate Long? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Delegate Long. Next, Director Higgs, Kevin Canale, and Mr. Glazer, are you testifying? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair Atterbury and Vice Chair Wilkins. Congratulations on your first hearing. My name is Michael Higgs, and I am the Director of the Department of Assessments and Taxation. While the department appreciates the intent of the proposed legislation, SDAT advises that it would be impossible to implement this new program by the timeline suggested in the bill, as it would require a substantial update to the department's real property database. SDAT's vendor typically performs updates to new legislation at a reduced cost. However, it may require months of studying the necessary changes to be made before an accurate timeline can be developed. The department would incur additional costs if it attempted to speed up this timeline, although implementation does depend on jurisdictions first authorizing this program. To administer, the department would require first-time homebuyers to submit certain documents filed at closing along with their homestead credit application. In addition, SDAT could incur significant unknown computer programming costs to reprogram its tax system to allow for the carryover of the homestead property tax credit from one homeowner to another. For these reasons, SDAT offers this letter of opposition and urges a reconsideration of HB 73 in its current form. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Canali? Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Kevin Canali here on behalf of the Maryland Association of Counties in opposition to House Bill 76. Certainly appreciate the intent of the bill, but this is right church, wrong pew. The homestead property tax credit program is very successful. Nearly every county has lowered its cap on the allowable amount for the program. And under this bill, counties would incur a significant fiscal issue in terms of what this bill would cost. I know the bill has a significant fiscal note now, but it is important to note too that this is based on 1 year of sales data. So in previous years and previous iterations of this bill, we've seen the fiscal note be north of $80 million per annum. So certainly an issue for us in terms of fiscal cost, but also again, you know, we think this is the wrong way to provide this kind of incentive. We shouldn't be doing it by jeopardizing a successful program that works well in Maryland. So for those reasons, we'd oppose the bill and ask for an unfavorable report.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 73. Delegate Long, House Bill 22.
I think we have a panel.
Yes, I will call up the names that I have listed here. Virginia Dees, David Morseberger, Ella Ennis. I have a James Randisi. Let's just see if we have enough chairs. James Randisi. Okay. Dee Hodges. Dana Schultz. Okay, Delegate Long, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Delegate Bob Long, I'm here to introduce House Bill 22, Election Law Absentee Ballot Signature Requirement and Verification. This bill, as amended, would require, it could go either way, and that's why we kind of draft that way. They could either do signature verification, which we understand after hearing from the Board of Elections, they have the technology to do that now. In one of our briefings, the question was asked, could they utilize signature verification? They do have the equipment now to do that. I originally wanted to do a signature for witness, because one of the things we talked about was because the Board of Elections didn't know if they had, well, they didn't have the equipment to do that. So the absentee ballots is one of the things that we need to make sure that when it's accepted, that there's no problems with it. You know, we hear a lot of things happening as far as absentee ballots, you know, being misdelivered, delivered to the wrong person. It's being dropped in a box by someone else. I mean, we hear a whole lot of different things. Just to give you an idea of what happened back in Baltimore City during the 2022 general election, they had received ballots from the election of 2020. Now, the gentleman from the Board of Elections from Baltimore City stood on TV and says, we just received ballots from 2020, and they were going to accept them. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm shaking my head, wait a minute, this don't sound right. Never did get to the bottom of it, but apparently the mail system must have, whatever did, I'm not sure what they did, but, you know, they're going to accept ballots from 2020. It was two different elections. One was gubernatorial, one was presidential. And it just shades, you know, puts a shade over the process of the absentee ballot. We don't want to disenfranchise anyone. We want to make sure everyone votes. And with everything that's going on right now, a lot of people feel disenfranchised because of the validation of the absentee ballot and, you know, day of voting. And, you know, I would ask for a favorable vote, or, yeah, favorable vote on this. And, you know, like I said, I couldn't believe the guy from Baltimore City, I can't remember the gentleman's name, he was the director of the city, said that he was receiving ballots from 2020, and they're going to accept them, and I'm like, I was just shaking my head. Anyway, thank you, Madam Chair.
I'll go first. My name is Virginia Deese. I ask that you vote favorable to House Bill 22. Absentee ballot instructions clearly state on the ballot that they will have the signature verified. Currently, there is nothing in place to verify a signature to the citizen requesting the absentee ballot with the actual absentee ballot. In order to provide the citizens of Maryland with voter integrity, there must be signature verification process in place. So just to let you know, I copied from the website, which is in part of my document in the PDF. It says, in requesting it, your Maryland driver's license or MVA issued card, it says that your signature at the MVA will become your official voter registration signature. So if you do not have a Maryland driver's license, you use the last 4 digits of your Social Security number, and these 4 digits on your Social Security number become your official voter registration signature. That doesn't happen. The Maryland driver's license signature is not used, nor the Social Security Administration signatures. Signatures from the Maryland MVA could be imported into the voter records, and signatures also from Social Security could be imported into the voter records. The last option should require a citizen to present the local board of election with some sort of citizen identification in order to create a new signature to be kept with the voter registration. That doesn't happen currently. Unsigned ballots. I want to tell you about this. A good friend of mine was asked to count ballots during the primary election in 2022. No signature verification was performed at all on any of those absentee ballots. And absentee ballots without a signature on the outside of the envelope were referred to the Baltimore County Board of Elections as uncured ballots. These ballots are given to the Baltimore County Board, and they make a decision whether they're going to include that ballot or not. So I ask that you please include signatures and vote favorable for this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and congratulations, Madam Vice Chair. And Dave Morseberger again from Anne Arundel County, kind of lifelong resident. And I've been very active in voting. I've been chief election judge, poll watcher, challenger. I witnessed mail-in ballot and provisional canvassing down at the Anne Arundel County Board of Elections. I ran from office, and I've supported candidates ever since, you know, kind of I turned 18. So I've been involved. And I will say right now, there is such a lack of trust in our institutions right now to include election that we need to do everything that we can to regain trust in our system. And I think signature validation on absentee ballots will go a long way. When I witnessed the canvassing down in Anne Arundel County, there was a signature box, and if somebody put a slash in the box, that was considered a valid signature. If it was blank, that was not. And when you tell people that that was acceptable as a signature on the envelope, I mean, they were appalled. First, they were appalled that there was no signature validation, but then when you told them a slash in the box was an acceptable signature. Again, it comes down to this voter confidence, and we talk a lot about voter disenfranchisement, franchising voters. I think every time a bad ballot gets through the system, it disenfranchises every voter. So we don't want voters disenfranchised on either side. So a simple signature validation will not disenfranchise anybody. It will actually create confidence in the system and restore it that we've lost over the years. And it can start as something as simple as this right now. So I really request that you report in favor of signature validation of absentee ballots. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Dee Hodges. I appreciate being here to testify. I'm not going to repeat what other people have said, but I do think that over the years, the ballot system has changed so much that there's a lot of suspicion about the vote. And it's better to make it more secure and have people feel better about the vote. So anyway, my mother was in a nursing home for 11 and a half years with MS. And she always had a helper in the nursing home help her out. She couldn't write very well. And the helper filled out her ballot, as she said, supposedly. But my mother's signature had changed over those 11 and a half years and before. And so having another signature that can be truly verified is very, very helpful. So I highly recommend House Bill 22.
Who would like to go next?
Thank you. I'm Jim Randisi from Towson, Maryland, and I am testifying in favor of HB 22. It's in the interest of all citizens of Maryland that the voting process be free from fraud as much as possible. This bill puts into law a crucial requirement that will help prevent electoral fraud. I have firsthand knowledge of a situation at a large assisted care facility where residents were guided to vote for certain candidates on their mail-in ballot by staff personnel without understanding for whom the residents were voting and without a proper signature. By requiring the voter's signature and name of the witness, the applicable Board of Elections can assure that an individual is not submitting votes in large numbers. A free and fair election involves political freedoms and fair processes leading up to the vote, a fair count of eligible voters who cast a ballot, and steps that will discourage electoral fraud and disenfranchisement. It's crucial that election results are free from electoral fraud. Does election fraud occur? The answer is a resounding yes. The Heritage Foundation has a webpage that lists 481 pages of criminal convictions for election fraud. One example in Maryland, a non-citizen and therefore an ineligible voter voted 10 times in federal elections. Thank you, and appreciate it.
Hello, my name is Dana Schultz. I'm a United States Air Force combat veteran. I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. Election integrity is deeply distrusted, and absentee ballot signature verification will help to alleviate some of the mistrust. Absentee ballots without signature verification leaves Maryland open to nefarious actors abusing our weaknesses, which are already being attacked. After statewide canvassing, the election system, as it now stands, is being infiltrated by ballot harvesting on a mass scale. Ballot harvesting is the collection and delivery of batches of ballots, usually by partisan operatives such as non-governmental organizations. I was part of a group of concerned citizens who identified numerous anomalies after analyzing data from the 2020 and 2022 elections and canvassing the general elections voters in Crofton, Pasadena, and Severna Park in August of 22. The results were submitted in my written testimony. Marylanders want to make it easy to vote and hard to cheat. We want free, fair, and trustworthy process. Ballot harvesting is a clear and existential threat to election integrity. It increases opportunities for voter fraud, removes important safeguards that ensure more secure elections. Voter ID requirements are wildly popular and supported across demographic groups, including Black Americans. Voter ID requirements with a mere declaration of identity destroys all trust in our electoral process. Securing elections isn't a partisan issue. Policymakers need to be working together at the state, local, and federal levels to safeguard our elections with common sense measures that work. I fought and my friends died to protect our one vote for one American. Thank you.
Go ahead. Yep. Thank you, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Chairman Atterbury and members of the committee. I'm Ella Ennis, and I'm representing the Maryland Federation of Republican Women today, and we're here to support House Bill 22. We feel that it's very important that every vote cast be the vote of a validly registered voter, and that this HB 22 requires that every absentee ballot envelope be signed by the voter and have a witness. And that signature be verified at the Board of Elections with the signature on their voter registration record. This bill provides an exception for military personnel and their families overseas to not have to have a witness. Without the voter's signature and the signature verification on the absentee ballot, we could have another person fill out the ballot and the valid voter be denied their right to vote. Ballots can be lost or stolen from mailboxes, particularly in multifamily housing situations, and the verification of the voter's signature on their absentee ballot return envelope is an important safeguard to protecting their vote. To give you an example, in Calvert County in 2016, I was staffing the Central Committee office on Election Day, and I had a frantic call from a voter who had been told when she went to the poll that she had voted early, and she was very adamant that she had not voted early, and they made her use a provisional ballot. When they researched the situation, it turned out there were two people who had the same first name and the same last name, but different middle initials. Now, when the person, if they had been there, you know, it would have made a difference if they had, I'm really talking about the other bill, but their signature verification was have let this person who came on Election Day vote. But that is really important on absentee ballots as well, as to make sure that the wrong person doesn't vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, are there any questions for anyone who has testified thus far? Okay, seeing none, thank you. Delegate Long, you have one more person testifying in favor virtually, and we will have her join us now, Katja Harper.
Hi again, everyone. Thank you for letting me comment on this bill as well. I strongly support HB 22. Signature verification is a crucial safeguard to our election integrity, as many voters have already outlined here today. So under current policy, individuals wishing to vote need only submit their ballot with any kind of marking in the signature field. The problem with this is that, of course, many of our voter rolls are not clean. For instance, in Montgomery County in 2018, there were more voters who were registered than there were residents over 18. So that tells you right there that there may be individuals who have access to ballots who no longer live in the county or maybe have passed away. And if there's no signature verification, an individual who turns in a ballot for somebody else is disenfranchising the voter who may later come in. I served as a provisional judge in this past election in Frederick County, and I would say that about 60 to 70% of voters who had to vote provisional were voting so because the system indicated they had already received a mail-in ballot. Many of these voters were confused. They did not recollect requesting a ballot, and certainly some of them did not recall turning it in. And if indeed a ballot had already been voted in their name for mail-in, then their in-person vote does not count. It is now canceled out because somebody else voted on their behalf. The only way to prevent this situation from happening again in the future is to implement signature verification so that we can ensure the identity of the voter matches with an official state record. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Harper? Okay, seeing none, we have one individual signed up to testify unfavorable, Ms. Samuel.
Thank you, Chairwoman Atterbury and committee. Again, I'm Samuela Ansa, and I'm the voting rights advocate at Disability Rights Maryland, and I'm testifying in opposition to House Bill 22 to establish signature verification requirements on absentee ballots. We know absentee ballots is a large reason why voters with disabilities participated more in the past two elections. In fact, in 2020, 62% of voters with disabilities voted compared to 56% in prior elections. Requiring signatures to match voter registration records on absentee ballots will present a huge problem for voters with disabilities who cannot sign or whose signatures have changed. If this bill was in the best interest of expanding democracy and having as many people participate as possible, there would be a provision requiring voters to correct signatures or provide them if they were to be flagged and threatened to be uncounted. However, this bill is not in the best interest of democracy, so it does not have those provisions. For these reasons, we urge an unfavorable vote on HB 22.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 22. Calling our final bill for the day, House Bill 35, rounding out the Delegate Long show. And you have the same folks. You want me to call them on up?
Please.
Yes. Virginia Deese, David Morrisberger, Ella Ennis, Catherine Sullivan, James Randisi, if there are enough seats, and then Dee Hodges and Dana Schultz. And you have two folks, Delegate Long, signed up virtually in support.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Delegate Bob Long introducing House Bill 35, election in-person voting, proof of identification. Voter ID is a tool we need to improve our elections. I'll give you a little background what happened. There was a lady, I guess she was about 90 years old. She pulled up to vote, and she couldn't hardly walk. I mean, she did everything she could to walk. Regardless how she voted, it just made me even that much more determined to make sure our elections are valid and they're fraud-free. 90-year-old lady, 90-year-old woman had to park in a handicap. Unfortunately, she couldn't park here because of the row of handicap was all taken up by the people working in the poll. That was another issue we need to talk about. So what I did, I walked down, she got her walker out, I says, look, why don't you pull up here? And she pulled up actually on the sidewalk. I said, look, you know, you're 90 years old, you come here to vote, we want to make sure every vote counts. Well, she did. So she walked in, she could walk inside the door with her walker. She had to stop and relax before she finished walking in to vote. And I told her, I says, well, on your way out, please let someone know and they'll escort you to your chair and that way you can come back out and we'll open the door and make sure you can get out, get back in your car. That right there alone made it, made it that much more important to make sure that every valid vote counts. Because if one invalid vote is counted, whether fraudulently or mistakenly, you know, it would have canceled this lady's vote out, 90 years old. She's coming out to exercise her rights as a citizen. And, you know, I sit there and talk to her for a few minutes, and it was just very impressive that, you know, a woman this age, who could barely walk from here to where the Madam Chair is sitting and back, come out to vote. That means something. Getting back to the voter ID, and that's why I'm presenting all these bills and legislation. there've been a lot of talk about, people showing up to vote, giving different names or whatever. I've actually witnessed it back in 2010 when Governor Ehrlich ran. There was a lady riding around in a van. It was very distinctive. I mean, you couldn't miss it because it had handicap tags, and she was a woman you could describe very easily. I voted like 2 or 3 different polls. And how I knew this, because I was working all the different polls to see what was happening. And we called the Board of Elections, and also called the Republican, I think we called Central Committee, but they just told us to stand down. So we did. But that being said, that woman was voting, and I'm here to testify today, she voted in 3 different precincts. Now that canceled out that woman's vote that had to walk and sit down and walk. That's just not right, by no means. And that's why we presented this bill. We actually did an informal survey on Facebook, and I know this is, it's informal, but I says, do you think voter ID should be required? 20,000 people commented yes. There was a few that said, okay, if you do this and do that, okay, that's fine. And everyone I've talked to said, yes, we need to have voter ID. You can't even go to the library and get a book without voter ID, without ID. So that's why we're presenting this bill. We want to make sure that our elections are fair, they're fraud-free, and we want to restore, like this gentleman said before me, we want to restore the confidence back into our elections, regardless of the outcome. We all get mad when our candidate doesn't win, but if they do that legally and there's no shadow cloud over that, then it's a little bit harder to accept. But when you have a cloud over top of an election where your candidate didn't win, that just makes it even worse. We've seen the outcome of that in January 6th. People stormed the Capitol. Why? Because they felt that there was fraud and everything going on, absentee ballots, whatever. I'm not going to go into that, but that was a hard day for me to sit there and watch, because these people felt that compelled to come out. And most of those gentlemen, I know a lot of them, was out peacefully protesting. And we can go into other conversations about that. But we want to make sure that every election is fair and fraud-free. And that's our duty as elected officials. We need to do whatever we can. And we do not want to disenfranchise anyone. By no means do I want to see anyone not be able to vote. But I want to make sure if you're able to vote, you do vote, and you have the right to do that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Who would like to go next? I'll go. Okay.
My name is Kate Strauch-Sullivan, and I'm a resident of Baltimore County, and I'm here to support House Bill 35. This would add essential security to our voting rights by adding proof of identity to our voter requirements. I have provided written testimony, and I hope all of you will have a chance to read that. It does offer the data that backs up some of my arguments today. And along those lines, I know it's been a long day for all of you, and I really appreciate all of you here paying attention to our voice, which is really important to me, certainly today, and I really appreciate that. But I'm going to summarize some of the reasons I think this is such an important requirement to our voting rights. I'm going to start with, being that all of you are elected officials, I'm going to start with the idea that 80% of Americans support requiring voters to show photo identification. That places those who oppose it in the minority. Deep outliers. 80% is no small number, and it sounds like from Delegate Long that number also prevails in Maryland. There is no evidence that voter ID requirements deter citizens. I looked, there's no conclusive study that suggests that. And I would also be very, very careful about the soft bigotry of low expectations. There is no basis to the claim that requiring ID is an unfair and unreasonable requirement that marginalizes members of our society. With that logic, people couldn't get married, fly a plane, go to a bar, check into a hotel, buy cigarettes, go to concerts. The list goes on and on. There is evidence to suggest that states with stricter voter requirements enjoy higher voting rates. In the event of election crime investigations, it is easier to see that when there are voter ID requirements. I've worked with Board of Elections. I know that they support this, and I see how hard they work. And this is one way we could restore that confidence that I know that they would really appreciate. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next.
So my name is Virginia Deese again. I live in Baltimore County. I have a bachelor's degree in information systems, and I've been working in that field for almost 40 years. So I want you to know, in the places that you have to have a Maryland driver's license or some kind of government-issued ID, in addition to what Ms. Sullivan said, to purchase alcohol, to go to the airport, to get a fishing license, to get a crabbing license, hunting license, to open a new bank account, to apply for one of your jobs, you have to show your driver's license on the application. The list goes on, and purchasing over-the-counter Sudafed, your license is needed to go into a hospital to get health care. When registering as a candidate, and I'm sure my list can grow and grow even longer. And I think it is appalling that no government-issued identification is needed to cast a vote in this state. There's no signature verification, which we spoke about earlier, between the absentee ballot and the person casting the ballot. My mother is 88 years old. She is legally blind. She does not drive. She has a government-issued South Carolina identification. She makes sure that she votes in every election. This is so important to her. If you check on the website for the Baltimore County Board of Elections, they need the last 4 digits of your Social Security number if you do not have a driver's license, and it takes them 48 hours to validate the information with Social Security in order to obtain a government-issued identification. My vote counts, and I'm proud that I vote every year, and I want to make sure that you all are doing your duty and that you're making our votes count as well, because it's all important to us. That's why we're testifying here today. We're giving up our vacation time in order to testify. It's that important to each and every one of us. Thank you very much for your time.
I'm sorry if I can get up in this little seat. Okay, I'm Ella Ennis again, and I'm here for the Maryland Federation of Republican Women, and our 1,400 plus members support this legislation strongly. We feel that the right to vote is one of our most precious rights as Americans, and that ensuring that the person who votes on Election Day or is the person who is actually registered is very much a sacred duty for the Board of Elections. The most reliable method of ensuring that the person who's voting is the registered voter in the poll box is to have a photo ID, government-issued photo ID. It not only prevents fraudulent voting, it also helps to prevent mistakes when the judge of the elections is listening to the person saying their name. If they're looking at their identification, they're going to see their address and their name, and it's much more likely that they will not make a mistake. The Motor Vehicle Administration provides a government-issued photo ID to any voter. It is free to them for voting, so there really is no reason that a person can't have a photo ID. The bill provides an exception that if you don't have a government ID, that you can have a non-government photo ID and have a copy of your utility bill or other verification of your address. And finally, it says that if you don't have any of those, you can vote a provisional ballot. So there is lots of effort here to make sure that everybody is treated fairly. And as I mentioned before, we had a case of where we had 2 voters with the same first and same last name, but they had a different middle initial. And it is only because the voter who voted early put her initial on her signature when she signed the voter card that the second person got to have their vote counted after they had to cast a provisional ballot. And I do believe that a photo ID would have avoided that situation. So thank you very much, and please support this bill.
Thank you. Who's next?
I'm Jim Randisi from Baltimore County, and I'm testifying in favor of HB 35. It is in the interest of all citizens that the voting process be as free from fraud as possible. This bill puts into law a crucial requirement that will help prevent electoral fraud. Think of how many times you are asked to provide a voter ID. I needed to provide a voter ID to get in here today. So currently, poll judges only require the voter to state their address. Without requiring a voter to show a voter proof of identity, it's very possible that individuals may show up, cast votes for individuals they know have moved out of the state or they know are deceased. There's been no evidence that voter ID laws prevent eligible voters from casting a ballot. According to a Monmouth study, Americans support both easier access to early voting and requiring photo identification to vote. Ballotpedia has a study that concludes the same. In 2019, the Heritage Foundation has an article. New study confirms voter ID laws do not hurt voter turnout. In other words, voter ID laws don't suppress votes. This latest study echoes the conclusion of others, including a landmark report by that same Heritage Foundation, finding that voter ID laws do not reduce voter turnout. And as I said before, does election fraud occur? And the Heritage Foundation has 481 pages of criminal convictions for election fraud. And so the steps included in this bill can help to assure that citizens of the great state of Maryland can rely on voter counts and subsequent election results. Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am?
Yes, I'm Dee Hodges, also from Baltimore County. I want to mention that Maryland is one of only 15 states without some form of voter ID. I think that there are many illegal votes. In fact, I spoke with a young man who was an illegal alien who lived in Baltimore County, and he insisted to me that he had the right to vote. I don't know whether he was able to vote or not, but it was just a happenstance meeting on a sidewalk. When Indiana required voter ID, the number of voters actually increased because I think it probably increased trust in the system. Now, the only thing I'm concerned about is the DMV. And there are non-citizens who come in, get driver's licenses, and they are referred over to a voter office to sign up to vote. That concerns me. But as far as the rest goes, voter ID is very, very important. We don't need busloads of people moving from district to district to vote. Thank you.
Sir, go ahead.
Again, I'm still David Morrisberger from Anne Arundel County. My theme here is about trust, regaining trust and reinstilling trust in the kind of our voting system here. Like I said, I've been a judge. I work with the Anne Arundel County. I've worked with the Baltimore County Board of Elections. There's been a lot of effort in accessibility of votes, and just here with the Maryland Legislative Services, it shows kind of voter turnout, and it's actually gone down. And you've heard people here talk about how the lack of trust in the system is really folks feeling they've been disenfranchised, and you hear them say, why vote? It doesn't matter. I don't trust the system. So we've got to do things, and this is a great opportunity to increase that trust. Ella, I mean, all of you out there have run elections, and you've gotten the voter rolls, and you've gone and talked to the voters. And when you get the voter roll, you get name, you get address, and you get date of birth. When you go up and request a ballot, you give name, address, and date of birth. So $125, I can find voter information and voter history of every voter in Maryland. I can find the low propensity voters and go up and tell the check-in judge, I am Joe Smith, I live at 123 Main Street, and my birthday is 1965. That's easy to do. I've been told it's done. Voter ID is to limit that. Also, the lady talked about the duplicate voter. Now, if that person had the same first name and last name, I really doubt they had the same date of birth. So the check-in judge was supposed to also verify with date of birth, and for some reason, when they checked that voter in, they didn't validate the date of birth and they gave them the wrong ballot. So even that check that they claim is sufficient turns out to be not sufficient using that anecdotal information. So again, the theme is restoring the confidence, and I hope that we can do things like this going forward that really reinstill confidence and result in voter turnout going out.
Thank you. Ms. Schultz?
Dana Schultz, United States Air Force combat veteran, public affairs bachelor's, and a master's degree. Election integrity is deeply distrusted, and voter ID will help alleviate some of the mistrust. As Ms. Sullivan said, the latest Rasmussen poll nationwide, support for voter ID is now over 80%. Polls continue to show that low voter confidence is nonpartisan, and it is not getting any better. The low voter confidence played out in the general election in Maryland. I submitted high-level statewide and Anne Arundel County statistics showing that Republican turnout voter decreased the least, even with overwhelming mail-in ballot use. Total Republican turnout exceeded Democrat turnout by several points, further demonstrating this is a bipartisan distrust of our electoral system. The claim that voter ID suppresses the turnout of minority voters is refuted by academic studies and election results in Georgia and Indiana in 2008 and 2010. Due to growing nonpartisan distrust in our election system, the identification of numerous apparent voting anomalies in the state of Maryland, and the documented issues pertaining to voting nationwide, Americans have lost faith in our election. To compound very low confidence, we're hearing more voters state they are not going to vote because they believe their vote doesn't matter, as shown in the data I submit with the Rasmussen polls. Marylanders want to make it easy to vote and hard to cheat. We want a free, fair, and trustworthy process. Voter ID requirements are wildly popular and supported across demographic groups, including Black Americans. Securing elections isn't a partisan or racist issue. Policymakers, like you all, need to be working together at the state and local levels to safeguard our elections. Once again, I did fight for our country and our sacred right to vote, and my friends died to protect our constitutional republic's freedom and our sacred right to vote.
Committee, are there any questions for anyone who's testified so far? Okay, we have 2 individuals signed up to testify favorable. We'll start with Ms. Harper.
My apologies, I was muted. I strongly support HB 035 for similar reasons for my support for House Bill 22. Regarding election security, voter ID is critical. As many people have already said, under current policy, anyone wishing to vote in a Maryland election right now need only supply their name, address, and date of birth when checking into a polling place. This process is not sufficiently secure. It would be easy, for instance, for anyone who knew this information about a spouse, friend, or colleague to present the information and vote on their behalf. Unfortunately, this kind of voter impersonation is only easier in our digital information age, where personal information is often hacked and published on websites like Spokeo or Rate My Life for all to see, sometimes at a nominal fee and sometimes with no restrictions at all. The requirement for voter ID does not appear to dissuade voters in any meaningful way from voting for any other reason. Despite Maryland's recent efforts to expand voter participation, such as allowing same-day registration, our voter turnout is down when compared with our last midterm. Despite sentiment in both parties that last year's midterms were of vital importance, voter turnout was down 16.6% compared with 2018. In contrast, Georgia, who enacted voter ID requirements in 2021 legislation, saw their largest midterm turnout ever, suggesting that voters were more likely to vote when they were confident that their elections were secure. I grew up in Prince George's County and have also lived in Montgomery and Frederick counties. Friends in all of these areas often express to me that they feel their vote does not count. With that in mind, I would say that we have strong evidence supporting that the fact that many people support voter ID and feel more secure when there is some process to verify the identity of the voter other than just hearsay. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Harper? Okay, seeing none, thank you. Next, virtually, we have favorable with amendment, Nelda Fink.
Here I am. Hello, I'm Nelda Fink. I'm in Anne Arundel County. Madam Chair and committee, thank you for hearing my comments today. The first thing I want to say is I'm totally 100% in favor of this bill and having ID be shown and the Maryland driver's license be shown as the ID for voting. However, I want to point out that there is a little bit of a leak at the beginning of our process, and that is with the Maryland voter registration. With the Maryland voter registration, it is dependent on either the driver's license or the last four of your social security number. A Maryland driver's license can be obtained by a person with a green card. So you don't have to be a U.S. citizen to get a Maryland driver's license. And I think that needs to be cleared up as one of the, I think that just needs to be cleared up as well. And not instead of this, but it just definitely needs to be cleared up. The second thing, I don't think that using a utility bill or anything of that nature should be used as a secondary form of ID. Not everybody has a utility bill. Not everybody has some of those things. But instead of that, the two things that are registered when you register to vote are your driver's license and a signature. So, and like some of the other people here said, date of birth and things of that nature. So if you, for whatever reason, move in or go to vote and forget your driver's license, then at least I think what needs to be required is an ID and then also a signature. And any signatures for voter identification, I believe, should be verified by a forensic expert so that you know that the signature matches and so that someone is there who knows how to match those signatures. Other than that, I'm totally in favor of this bill, and I hope you all can move it forward favorably. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Fink? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. Now we have one person signed up unfavorable, Ms. Ansah. Sir, you can step back. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Atterbury and Ways and Means Committee again. My name is Samuela Ansah, the Voting Rights Advocate at Disability Rights Maryland. I want to use this as an opportunity to underscore the importance of having an open and inclusive legislative process that allows everyone to participate and have their voice heard. Without an open and inclusive legislative process, bills such as HB 35 that establishes voter identification laws can pass as it did in the Ohio State Legislature. Ohio now joins a few states with strict voter ID laws that present barriers to the ballot for historically disenfranchised groups, such as people with disabilities who are twice as likely to not have a state-issued ID card and have barriers obtaining one. Also, Maryland already provides for voter identification once a voter registers, making this bill extraneous and in bad faith in ensuring an open democracy for everyone. For these reasons, we urge an unfavorable report on HB 35. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 35, and that concludes the Ways and Means bill hearings for today. Subcommittee chairs, I will see you in 5 minutes in the conference room. And can we please welcome our new subcommittee chairs, Delegate Julia Plakovich for Early Childhood Education. Did I say Julie Plakovich Carr? Did I'm sorry. Okay. And Delegate Ebersol has moved over to chair the subcommittee on education. And tomorrow we will be having bill hearings at 2 p.m. after the state of state. Please be on time. And also, if you have not paid your snack fee, it's 4 of you, please pay it. Thank you very much.